January 30, 1944. Anzio Beachhead, Italy. Headman Vera Hoffman's hand shook as his pencil touched the concrete surface of his command bunker while he documented what he had just observed through his periscope. The artillery fielded by the Americans is of unimaginable magnitude. Bunker Louisa is now obliterated. 4 feet of reinforced concrete disappeared in a single moment. Amid the haze and swirling debris, he observed the crater marking the former location of the stronghold that had endured for 8 months. The defensive structure, designed under Wehrmacht engineering protocols to survive direct impacts from 210mm shells, was completely erased by a lone shot from an American super heavy gun, firing from a distance too great to be seen. 32 soldiers from the 3rd Panzer Grenadier Division were lost alongside several tons of concrete and steel. The device used was the M1240mm Howitzer, which appeared in combat for the first time with the 697th Field Artillery Battalion. What both Hoffman and thousands of other German defenders would realize in the following months was that all prior beliefs about bunker warfare had become outdated overnight. The U.S. Army had introduced a weapon capable of mathematically turning even the most fortified shelter into a mass grave. The M1240mm Howitzer resulted from a 1940 study by the U.S. Army Ordnance Department that delivered a severe judgment. American artillery at the time was insufficient to defeat contemporary European defensive works. The most powerful available gun, the 155mm long Tom, could inflict damage but was unable to consistently demolish the fortified concrete bunkers that had become staples of German defense. The requirements for the new system seemed unrealistic. They sought a mobile gun able to launch a 360-pound shell over 14 miles with the accuracy necessary to target single bunkers and penetrate 6 feet of reinforced concrete. The complete set needed to be transportable by standard military vehicles. Rather than the enormous rail artillery pieces of World War I, what came out of the Waterfleet Arsenal in New York set a new standard of engineering. Weighing 64,700 pounds in its firing state, the M1 demanded a 14-man crew and could deliver a shot every 3 minutes at peak capacity. The gun's barrel alone weighed 23,000 pounds and stretched 35 feet, necessitating specialized carriage on a 6-wheeled trailer. Site preparation generally took 8 hours, which included digging the recoil pit and assembling parts using the M2 crane that was supplied with every gun. Production started in November 1942. Beginning with 6 prototypes. By 1944, Waterfleet Arsenal had increased to a monthly output of 13 guns, and ultimately built exactly 315 before ceasing production in August 1945. Each M1 was priced at $380,000, the equivalent cost of 12 Sherman tanks, though the overall strategic advantage would prove beyond measurement. The 697th and 698th Field Artillery Battalions reached the Anzio beachhead in January 1944, introducing the M1240mm Howitzers to active combat. The German 14th Panzer Corps had built a defense network through the hills nearby, interconnecting bunkers that controlled every possible route to the Allies. On January 30, 1944, at 14:30, the 697th fired the opening 240mm shell in battle, aiming for a German lookout position on the Auburn Hills. The shell covered 23,000 yards across 13 miles and hit its target squarely. The bunker, together with its observation equipment and personnel, was wiped out. Major Herman E. Smith, who led the 697th, detailed the psychological effects of this weapon in his unit's official account. After our inaugural day of firing, German pals reported that morale in their units had collapsed. They spoke of earthquake shells that vibrated the earth for hundreds of meters from the blast point. Some refused to return to bunkers after witnessing these attacks. The figures describing the devastation at Anzio were meticulously logged. Total rounds fired: 2,847. Bunkers attacked: 67. Bunkers destroyed: 61. Average shells expended per bunker: 4.8. A maximum distance of 25,100 yards was attained. The War Diary of the German 715th Infantry Division, which was captured following the liberation of Rome, recorded, "American super-heavy artillery renders our defensive positions untenable. Casualties from a single shell surpass those inflicted by days of standard bombardment." The breach at Monte Cassino in May 1944 highlighted the 240mm Howitzers' capacity to penetrate even the most robust defensive lines. For months, the Gustav Line withstood a series of Allied attacks, anchored by the old monastery that German paratroopers had converted into a stronghold. The 240th Field Artillery Battalion, armed with 8 M1 howitzers, became part of Operation Diadem on May 11, 1944. They were deployed near Monte, from which they could engage every German defense point along the Gustav Line. Their main objectives were the fortified bunkers set into the mountain below the monastery. Major General Francis Tuka of the British Army, whose 4th Indian Division had endured heavy losses during earlier attempts, observed the 240mm shelling and remarked how the American super-heavy artillery succeeded where months of bombing and standard artillery had failed. Each projectile that hit its mark completely neutralized a German fortified location. The psychological impact on the troops holding these positions was profound. They realized there was no place secure from attack. Throughout the breakthrough battle, the 240mm guns fired non-stop for 72 hours, discharging 1,847 shells. After the engagement, assessments revealed that of 43 key German bunkers engaged, 39 had been totally demolished. The remaining 4 emplacements had been deserted by their crews after shells landed nearby. The 240mm howitzer's success was due to more than just its huge shell. The American Fire Direction System played a crucial role. The Fire Direction Center, or FDC, which had been enhanced during 3 years of warfare, provided unmatched precision and coordination. Forward observers using 610 Seychelles rupees radios could request fire support from locations miles from the artillery. The information about their targets would be transmitted back to the FDC, where skilled staff computed firing solutions using graphical tables, slide rules, and weather data. Rounds could hit targets over 14 miles away within 4 minutes of a fire request. The time-on-target method further increased its psychological effect. Separate batteries firing from different areas at overlapping intervals enabled all projectiles to strike simultaneously. A German stronghold could be struck by 6 240mm shells in a span of 2 seconds, delivering over a ton of explosives without advance notice. In a 1944 report, Lieutenant Colonel Thomas B. Hedkin, leader of the 245th Field Artillery Battalion, stated, "We do not fire randomly. We execute targeted attacks. A forward observer pinpoints an exact bunker. We calculate the data and deliver 1 or 2 rounds directly onto it. The accuracy frightens the Germans more than sheer firepower." 4 M1240mm howitzers attached to 19th Corps participated in Operation Cobra, the July 1944 breakthrough from the Normandy bridgehead. The German 352nd Infantry Division had strengthened nearly every hedgerow and intersection near Saint-Lô, forming a complex defense that delayed the Allied push for weeks. The 272nd Field Artillery Battalion employed their 240mm guns on July 24, systematically demolishing German positions that had survived sustained aerial bombardments. Hill 122, the crucial high ground that overlooked Saint-Lô, had concrete bunkers built into its hidden slopes, making them resistant to attacks from the air. Technical Sergeant Raymond Jones, who was Section Chief in Battery A of the 272nd Field Artillery, later recounted, "We could tell the Germans believed they were protected in those reverse-slope bunkers. Our spotter relayed the target coordinates. We used 3 shells for effect. Once the dust settled, all that remained was a crater where the bunker once was." The effect on morale was immediate. Germany's 3rd Parachute Division, seasoned soldiers who had fought at Cassino, began leaving entrenched positions instead of enduring further 240mm shelling. Their commanding officer, General Richard Schy, was taken prisoner on July 31 and informed his captors during questioning, "Your super heavy guns rendered static defense untenable. My troops, experienced veterans who had never withdrawn before, abandoned their bunkers in retreat." The offensive against the Gothic line in northern Italy during the fall of 1944 showcased how effective the 240mm howitzer was in fighting in mountainous regions. German military engineers dedicated a year to building defensive works along the Apennine ridges, exploiting the rugged landscape to construct positions they believed artillery could not breach. In September 1944, the 697th Field Artillery Battalion, seasoned from Anzio and the advance towards Rome, emplaced their howitzers in the valleys beneath the Gothic line. With high trajectory fire, they could deliver shells almost straight down onto German strongholds hewn into the rear slopes of mountains. The devastation wrought on the Futa Pass defenses highlighted the weapon's effectiveness. The pass, dominating the key road to Bologna, was defended by elaborate bunkers erected by Organization Todt. On September 16, 1944, the 697th commenced methodical shelling of these German positions. Private First Class Donald Matthews, who handled ammunition with the 697th, wrote in a letter home, "The rounds soar so high they vanish into the clouds before descending directly onto German bunkers. The blasts make the mountain tremble. After a direct hit, the bunker's replaced by a crater." The Futa Pass was secured after 5 days. German losses from bunkers collapsing surpassed those suffered in direct action. The 4th Parachute Division's record of operations noted, "American super heavy projectiles penetrate roofs formerly considered safe. Spirits are breaking down as troops refuse to occupy their defenses." The deliberate destruction of the Siegfried line starting in September 1944 marked the 240mm howitzer's most significant contribution toward the Allied triumph. The West Wall extended for 390 miles from the Netherlands to Switzerland, featuring more than 18,000 pillboxes, bunkers, and defensive positions erected between 1936 and 1940. The 265th Field Artillery Battalion deployed their M1 howitzers against the Siegfried line close to Arkham in September 1944. The defenses oppressing them were intimidating. There were Type 10 bunkers with walls measuring 3 to 4 feet in thickness, command bunkers with 8-foot thick armor, and infantry posts with interlaced lines of fire. The initial significant trial came at the Scharnhorst line, an outwork of the Siegfried line that protected Aachen. On October 8, 1944, the 265th started preparatory bombardment for the 1st Infantry Division's attack. Within 6 hours, they fired 238 projectiles, eliminating 19 out of 22 bunkers targeted. Corporal Robert Williams, acting as forward observer for the 16th Infantry Regiment, saw the shelling firsthand. Every 240mm impact resembled a minor quake. Concrete fortifications once thought to require days to neutralize were reduced in mere minutes. The German occupants never stood a chance. This method was repeated all along the front. The 278th Field Artillery Battalion, in support of 5th Corps, demolished 73 bunkers in the Schnee-Eifel area during December 1944. The 698th Field Artillery Battalion, active near Metz, eradicated the encircling forts around the city in November 1944, discharging more than 3,000 shells over 14 days. The Baja Mountains operation from October to November 1944 posed distinct obstacles. German troops had entrenched on the densely wooded ridges with bunkers hidden underneath a thick tree canopy. Shielded from aerial spotting and safe from standard artillery due to the terrain, the 265th Field Artillery Battalion devised innovative strategies for combat in forests. Employing shells with proximity fuses when possible, they produced air bursts above the trees, sending blasts downward onto the bunkers. When standard shells were used, they applied the box and one approach. 4 shells at the corners around a suspected spot, then 1 shot in the middle. Master Sergeant Harold Anderson, Section Chief with the 265th, explained their method. The woods made spotting difficult, but the 240mm didn't require pinpoint accuracy. A close detonation could still bring down bunkers through ground tremors. We'd fire, pause for the dust to clear, and the infantry would encounter only craters and remains. Strasbourg was liberated on November 23, 1944, following a preliminary bombardment of its outer defenses using 240mm artillery. The German 553rd Infantry Division evacuated their defensive lines after 12 of their bunkers were destroyed within 90 minutes of precise shelling. Later assessments by U.S. Army engineers clarified the reasons behind the 240mm howitzer's exceptional performance against strongholds. The M17 concrete-piercing shell, equipped with a hardened steel tip and weighing 360 pounds, struck targets at 2,300 feet per second. This resulted in an energy transfer of about 2.8 million foot-lb to an area under 20 in across. The pressure at impact exceeded 200,000 psi, which overmatched the compressive strength of any concrete encountered. Most significantly, the shell's delayed fuse mechanism ensured penetration of 3 to 6 feet prior to exploding. The detonation within the mass of concrete produced what the engineers described as sympathetic fracturing. Shock waves rebounded off steel reinforcements, producing intricate stress distributions that broke entire constructions apart internally. The M114 high-explosive projectile carried 49 pounds of TNT mixed with aluminum powder, giving it a 40% higher blast impact compared to TNT alone. If set to explode upon hitting the surface, it created craters measuring 50 feet in width and 20 feet in depth in regular soil, and 30 feet by 12 feet in more rocky terrain. Using 240mm howitzers on the battlefield necessitated extensive logistical resources, highlighting the American prowess in organization. Each battalion's daily needs were between 50 and 100 shells, weighing from 18 to 36 tons. Fuel consumption amounted to 2,000 grams for both vehicle towing and generators. There was need for specialized maintenance apparatus. Ammunition transporters with strengthened chassis were designated. The line for ammunition resupply extended from the waterl at Arsenal all the way to the combat front, in some cases spanning up to 3,000 miles. Every shell went through exact shell body forging, machining to a tolerance of 0.01 in, care in filling with explosives, fitting of precise fuses, as well as individual inspections and proof firing. By March 1945, U.S. Army reserves in Europe included more than 500,000 240mm shells. Usage peaked at 35,000 rounds a month during the Rhine crossings. This output level was something neither Germany, Japan, nor the Soviet Union could equal. In March 1945's Rhine crossing, the 240mm howitzer was used to its utmost potential. Operation Plunder, Montgomery's planned crossing on March 23 to 24, was launched after the most massive artillery barrage seen in the Western Theater. American 12th Corps supplied 12 240mm howitzers for the attack. The goal was the Wesel defensive belt, where the German 84th Infantry Division had established an extensive bunker complex along the eastern shore. The 240mm guns commenced deliberate elimination of their designated targets at 1,700 hours on March 23. Captain William Morrison, leader of Battery B, 278th Field Artillery Battalion, noted, "We had aerial images marking every fortification. Beginning in the north, we systematically moved south, attacking every strongpoint with 4 to 6 shells. By midnight, we had demolished 31 bunkers and inflicted damage upon another 12. The crossing encountered minimal resistance. German eyewitnesses spoke of total collapse in morale after seeing their defenses destroyed. Strength reports for the 84th Division indicated 2,400 men lost to shelling alone, mostly from bunkers falling in.